Shalom everyone. I hope you enjoyed the last teaching. It was a little scattered, I know. Might have been a little bit hard to understand, but it was building a foundation. And I know it's taken 10 parts, but we're getting somewhere. We're getting close to the end of this. Then we'll start a new subject after that. But we'll get back to blood covenant, and I want to bring out this. I want to ask, what was the idea behind the blood covenant? We've talked a lot about blood covenant, how they did it, why they did it, and what it entailed, but what was the whole idea behind the blood covenant? That's what we kind of want to get to, because why was it started? And if God started, as I believe that He did, what was the idea, the purpose behind it? But we're told about two young men who entered a village at the base of the mountains of Lebanon, and this was back like during the 1800s. It was part of Syria at the time, and they were going to be joined as blood brothers. And the village had been called together, and these young men had been friends for a long time, but they wanted to become blood brothers. And so the villagers come and they announce and tell the reason why they want it. They want to become blood brothers, and so they wrote down the stipulations of the covenant, and they wrote it on paper, whatever it was that they used at the time, and they signed it in front of witnesses, several witnesses. And so then they took a sharp lancet and they cut a vein in the other's arm, or probably not a vein, but a big vein, but just a small vein in the arm. And then they inserted a quill into that and sucked the blood from that a little bit, and then the blood was wiped on the papers. And of course they did one man and then the other man's arm like this. And then together they said something kind of like this, that we're brothers in a covenant made before God, and if one deceives the other, then him will God deceive. Then this record, it was folded up real carefully, and it was sewn into a little leather case. Some might call that an amulet or whatever, but they said it was about 1 inch square from what I read. And then it would be worn around their neck or around the arm of each of them as a token. This idea of wearing something like this around the neck or the arm goes back a long way, even to the biblical scriptures as well, that we mention on the tefillin, or what some people call the phylacteries, if they've read the Bible, the New Testament. Anyway, in Arabic, the word for this was, meaning the covenant of blood, was Mahadat Mahadat Edom, meaning the covenant of blood. This rite was recognized in Syria as late 1800s, and they recognized it as a very ancient custom of this land. And I don't doubt that there's probably still a custom of that. It may vary today from the late 1800s, but I'm sure that it's still there. It still exists in some form. And the two men are now recognized as brothers of the covenant. And as I mentioned earlier, in marriage, there could be a divorce, but once two people became, or two groups became tied in a blood covenant, death was the only end to that. And then, as I said before, some cultures even believe that it continued after death into the descendants, and they were held responsible. But this is how important it was, how sacred it was, and how lasting it was. And that's the important thing you see about blood covenant, that it was sacred and that it was lasting. Nothing can break it, nothing. I mean, even now, if you promise something for the Lord, God's going to hold you to that. He's going to require it of you. Not life or death could change this blood covenant. And just wanted to bring out that the Arabic word for blood and friendship was the same word. I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know what it was, couldn't tell you what it was, but I know that I did read that the Arabic word for blood was dam. I know that's what it is in Hebrew. It's dam. That's why they call, I was trying to think the group. I can't think of it now. But anyway, it means blood. And then there was this missionary. His name was Livingston. A lot of you probably heard of him, but I can't remember his first name, but he called this right. He went to a lot of places. He went to Africa. He went to a lot of the Arabic countries, to the Middle East. I mean, this man just traveled. Back in the 1800s, he traveled virtually everywhere as a missionary, and he called this blood covenant Kasindi. in his books, but he was in charge of the Livingston Search Expedition, and it was a missionary group. It wasn't just him that went out, but there were groups of men who went out, and he said that many of them took part in blood covenant ceremonies. He took part in them, and a guy in his group named, his last name was Stanley, he said he underwent about 50 of the blood brother rites. And I was just thinking about that when I heard that. I'm thinking, man, you know, if they did that today after probably the first rite, they'd probably end up with AIDS. You know, I don't know if it existed back then or not. It may have, but people may not have understood what it was. But I thought, well, that's sad, you know, people today, if they do something like that, they're going to probably end up with AIDS. So, you know, it's just, that's not a good thing there. But anyway, getting off subject, each tribe may have done it slightly different in his report, in his book and stuff, but the foundation of the whole thing was pretty much the same. You could tell that it was the same ancient blood covenant rite that had passed down through thousands of years. And the reason that you find so many was because originally the blood covenant was to protect tribes, protect individuals, to make them the protectors of one another, so that they wouldn't go to war with one another, wouldn't fight one another, and they would be friends. And so that's probably why that it spread so great and so wide. And the thing about it, even during the time of Livingston, when they traveled to these foreign lands, there was so many, you know, a lot of places have become more civilized today. But back then, they had a lot of tribes who were still cannibals. And so it paid to have some blood friendship with some close, high-up people. And he even told about several instances of this that spared his life. I thought was pretty interesting. If you get a chance to read his book, I can't even remember the name of it now, but it would be something, you know, that help you to understand more about this in that area of the world. But to show how highly this is looked on, he told a story about helping this native woman in this village. She went into this village and she had a tumor, and he performed an operation on her to take the tumor out. And while he was doing this, blood squirted into his eye. Well, when the lady knew about it, she told him, she said, now you're a blood relation to me. Well, we're in a blood covenant, so she said, when you pass this way, just always let me know. I'll cook for you. And he thought it strange that this was something that he thought was really strange that he brought out. And I thought it was very interesting too, because he said these people were dressed a lot like, and had utensils a lot like those on the monuments of ancient Egypt. And this was not in an area near this. So I thought that was pretty interesting there, that these people were more closely related across the world than people realize. And I'm not going to get into that because that's a totally different subject. And it's not even really a biblical subject, so I'm not going to go there. But the root idea behind this rite seems to be that the blood is the life of a person. Not that it's just essential to life, but that it is the life. And the scriptures bear something similar to that out as well. But they felt like in these ancient rites, and they felt that like when they passed it from one to another, that it carried an imparted life. They saw it as the mixing of two lives together, or two peoples together. Their personalities, their natures were brought together by the mixing of the blood. Two bodies and one common life. But not only are traces of this rite found in Africa, but amongst many peoples of the world, as I mentioned earlier. There was a lore among the Norseland people that was kind of interesting, that they would do this blood ceremony while they were lying under the grass, under the sod, and symbolizing that the two were being buried, but they were coming up as one. And I thought that was really interesting, because it really compares with what Paul said about baptism and us being born into Christ. And I mean, we're talking about two very distant parts of the world. So I found that to be very interesting there. But even in China and Madagascar, there's traditions of blood covenant. And Malagasy had a tradition where that they would cut themselves in the breastbone near the heart, and they would use a fowl in the ceremony, and they would use gunpowder and some other things. But I noticed that gunpowder and salt was used quite often, even in the Bible, for this idea of blood covenant. So I thought that was interesting. Also, you had the, I don't know how to say that, from Papua New Guinea or Guinea or whatever, the Papuan or whatever I'm not sure how that's pronounced. But anyway, the Polynesian races, the Malay, they also had ceremonies of blood brotherhood, and some of these cultures would drink the blood. Some would just smear it on each other or mix it on each other. Even North and South America have cultures of the blood brother covenant. Brazil, the Sioux Indians, the Dakota Indians, and then there was a Grecian man, however you say it, by the name of Lucian, and he said that the Scythians did a blood covenant. And then you have the historian Tacitus, who tells of a blood covenant amongst the annals of, I can't say this man's name, but anyway, he was an Iberian. He was the leader of the Iberians, Radamistus. He speaks of a covenant with Mithridates, king of the Armenians, and he says that it was a custom of the kings that they would come together to make covenant, and when they did, they would join their right hands together, they would tie their thumbs together, and then they would draw blood by light stroke and lick the blood, I guess, from each other's finger. But anyway, they regarded this as a divine covenant, and it was made sacred by the blood. So the idea behind the ancient blood covenant was that it made a person, two people one or two groups one, that it was a sacred covenant, it was a lasting covenant, and I bring that out numerous times in this lesson because I want people to grasp this. And Herodotus also, the historian, also mentions that the Scythians as well said that they drank wine mingled with blood in these covenants. Now I want to bring out something about the Latin word for blood. The Latin word for blood is osir. And I thought that was interesting because osir is a form of the word Assyria. And then you have the Hebrew word asar, and it means to bind together, like in a mutual covenant. And the word isar is a vow of self-renunciation. And if you took the phrase asar isar al nefesh, it means to bind a self-devoting vow on one's life or on one's blood, because the blood is the life. And in Arabic, the word asara means to bind, while the word asar is a covenant, and then the word aswar is a bracelet, a band, or fetter. Now you might wonder why I bring these words out, but it's very interesting because, see, root words, even English has root words, but root words are very important. Words are made from root words. You have a root word, and then you have words that stem from that root word that are related to that root word, and that's why it's important to go back in the Old Testament and study Hebrew, because you have words and then you have root words that come from those words, and they all go back to that root word. The understanding of that goes back to the root word. And if you understand the root word, then you get a better idea of what something is talking about and where the idea, or what the idea is that it's talking about.